In 565, the collapse of the Roman Empire brought forth one of the most turbulent times in English history, the Middle Ages. The era was characterized by the stifling of information, hence the name the Dark Ages. It was also noted as a time of increasing violence and barbaric tactics in war. So what was it like to be a soldier on the front lines during one of the most violent periods in history? Though it was the Dark Ages, fighting campaigns weren't completely without strategy. Taking into account the seasons, leaders realized the best time to fight was during fair weather. As such, war campaigns typically commenced after the crops were planted in spring and were called off come harvest time. Charlemagne abided by this rule and gathered his men every spring. But a siege could last for months at a time, well into the cold of winter. In 1066, during William the Conqueror's invasion of England, English troops awaiting battle were ordered to return and tend to their harvest, which left the king vulnerable. During the Crusades, fighting became a family affair. A soldier would bring his wife, mother, and children to wherever they were fighting. A prime example of this was Peter the Hermit and thousands of Western European Christians who marched toward Jerusalem with their families in tow to fight. En route to the Holy Land, his party ran into a group of Turks who went into tents killing whomever they could find, including the weak, the feeble, clerics, monks, old women, and nursing children. Many historians characterize the medieval period by its intensification of violence. This was reflected in battle with weapons of the age, such as maces, swords, and axes. In 1415, Enguerrand de Monstrelet's account of the Battle of Agincourt told of the aftermath, that French soldiers on the precipice of death were witnessed crawling into the woods and neighboring villages to die. If not fatally wounded, survivors were deformed or brain damaged. The more romantic deemed these prestigious scars that showcased their prowess in battle. Typically, however, brutal wars ended in brutal death. Combat in the Dark Ages relied on the training, or lack thereof, of troops. Soldiers relied on their life experiences with riding and hunting to perform in battle. When the troops arrived for battle, they didn't participate in any formal training except for minimal drills and formation exercises. In the late 12th century, knights gained some experience via jousting tournaments. However, it was a sport that came with the risk of death, such as when Leopold V, Duke of Austria, died in a jousting accident. In the 13th century, the reward for winning a battle was looting fallen soldiers for their armor and weapons and pillaging the conquered land. There was even a chance of reaping a hefty reward for ransom, like in the case of captured King John. This practice later changed when kings instead distributed the wealth, sometimes in the form of land. Charlemagne also practiced wealth distribution and even gave a cut to the church. Unlike Greek, Roman, and early modern soldiers, medieval armies didn't have uniforms. One's armor largely depended on family wealth. This also went for food during the campaign. Charlemagne provided a list to his soldiers for what they should bring. This included weapons, armor, and food for a few months. Not only did they have to potentially give their life for their ruler, they essentially had to foot the bill, too. It wasn't only working men that fought. Medieval armies often contained men of the cloth. And they weren't there for prayer. They participated in battles, such as William the Conqueror's half-brother Odo, who was the Bishop of Bayeux. Like a game of telephone, communication on the battlefield wasn't an easy task, and misinformation could incite panic among the troops. In 1066, during the Battle of Hastings, a rumor about William of Normandy's death caused troops to flee. It was only when William removed his helmet, proving he was alive, and gave an inspiring speech which made his men rejoin the fight. Sometimes inspiration would be hired out. A famous example of this was when William Shakespeare wrote a speech for King Henry V for the Battle of Agincourt. The inspiration paid off as Henry's troops won the war against the larger and better prepared French force. In the Middle Ages, many wars were fought in the name of God. This was a byproduct of the close relation between religion and state. In 732, when Charles Martel won against a Muslim force, they deemed it a demonstration of God's will and support. In the early 1st century and all through the Crusades, fighting in God's honor was also used as a rationale by the clergy for their participation in the bloody art of war. A prime example of this was when Pope Urban II called for the Crusades, anything in the name of God. You may think destroying your own countryside and resources is a counterproductive activity, but that's not the case when sieges are imminent. Destroying the surrounding land took away potential resources for the invading army. In addition to this, they would prepare the land by digging ditches, erecting pikes, and making platforms to fight from. Besides, rebuilding the land was a much better outcome than losing it and your life. Battling in a rain of arrows was common. Archers were essential in battle. Whether they were using short bows, crossbows, or longbows, these men had a large impact on winning a war. As the Middle Ages progressed, arrows were altered to penetrate armor, saddle, chainmail, and most importantly, flesh. This made archery one of the most modified war technologies of the age, and because of archery's ferocity in battle, many questioned the ethics of the evolving military technology.